Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Abdul Kader Choughley Sahib, respected Founder Director Professor Hasan Nizami, the Director, the dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, faculty, staff, teachers and the taught, a warm welcome to all of you. Today, the Nizami Center for Quranic Studies, Aligarh Muslim University is organizing Khalil Ahmad Nizami Memorial Lecture on Sayyid Hasan Nadvi and Quranic Studies, a multi-dimensional approach by eminent distinguished Islamic scholar Dr. Abdul Kader Choughley from South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the Nizami Center is committed to the advancement of academic excellence in teaching, research and publication. Its outreach program activities promote a more informed understanding of Islamic culture and civilization. It provides a meeting point between the Islamic and Western worlds of learning. The center contributes to the Aligarh Muslim University's mission of promoting interfaith dialogue, peaceful coexistence, Islamic studies, religious education, and educational advancement of Indian Muslims. Without taking further time, I would like to invite Mr. Hamid Mia, Assistant Professor in the Nizami Center for Quranic Studies, to recite verses from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رجال لا تلهيهم تجارة ولا بيع عن ذكر الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة يخافون يوما تتقلب فيه القلوب والأبصار. صدق الله العظيم. की कलिमा की तिलावत का शर्फ हासिल किया, उसका तर्जुमा पेश है। ऐसे लोग जिनको अल्लाह के जिक्र से और नमाज पढ़ने से और ज़कात देने से ना तो तिजारत गाफिल लगती है और ना ही खरीद व फरोख्त, वो उस दिन से डरते हैं जिसमें दिल और आँखें खौफ और घबराहट से उलट जाएंगी। थैंक यू, शुक्रिया।
मैं यादगारी निशान पेश करने के लिए कैलीग्राफी के स्टूडेंट्स को दावत देता हूँ, अपने टीचर के साथ तशरीफ लाएं और वाइस चांसलर के जरिए से बदस्त वाइस चांसलर मेहमान ग्रामी को यादगारी निशान पेश करें। आई रिक्वेस्ट स्टूडेंट्स ऑफ कैलीग्राफी प्लीज कम हियर एंड प्रेजेंट जी अनु बाला एंड सबा हुसैन। अनु बाला। Dr. Abdul Kader Choughley साहब का Dr. Abdul Kader Choughley is eminent Islamic scholar from South Africa. PhD in Islamic Studies, Principal of Islamic School, former Director Academic of Indian Schools. The unique thing is that he memorized the Holy Quran in 4 months only. 4 महीने में पूरा कुरान आपने हिफ्ज़ कर लिया माशाअल्लाह। 55 साल की उम्र था, 55 साल की उम्र में 4 मंथ के अंदर कुरान। He has authored books on Maulana Sayyid Abdul Hasan Ali Nadvi, Islamic resurgence, Sayyid Abdul Hasan Ali Nadvi and his contemporaries. The second book is Sayyid Abdul Hasan Ali Nadvi, Life and Works. The third one is Abdul Alim Siddiqui and his mission. 4. Fazlur Rahman Ansari, Life and Thought. He involved in research on contemporary Islamic thought in South Asia, Quranic studies. His current research deals with the contributions of Ulum Quran of ulama to Quranic studies in South Asia. अब इसके बाद मैं चूँकि वाइस चांसलर को साहब को कोई मीटिंग में जाना है, इसलिए I request Honorable Vice Chancellor to his address.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Respected Dr. Abdul Kader Choughley, Professor Nizami Sahab, founder, director of this center, Professor Nadvi, Mrs. Choughley, and other senior and distinguished teachers such as Professor Masood Sahab, Professor Shan Muhammad Sahab, Professor Razaullah Khan Sahab, and so many others. I want to name everybody, but I think that will, if I name everybody, then it will take very long. So that's why I am not naming. Our EC member Hafizullah Sahab is also sitting there. So I welcome all of you to this lecture. And this is a state-of-the-art facility which has been developed in EMU. And we are all proud of our K. Nizami Quranic Center. The infrastructure which has been developed, the facilities which have been provided. Professor Hasan Nizami has played a very important role in this entire project. And the university is thankful to him. His younger brother Farhan Nizami, he was my junior in Our Lady of Fatima. He also played a very important role in this. He has collected a lot of funds for this, and we are also thankful to him. When I was a student, Professor K. Nizami Sahab was the Dean of Students' Welfare. So I had an interaction with him at that time. And he was a wonderful teacher. And he was a role model. And he has done a lot for the development and for the Department of History. Our History Department is one of the best in the country, and he also played a very important role in that. So I welcome Dr. Abdul Kader Choughley Sahab, and I am very thankful to him that he has come all the way from South Africa to deliver this lecture. And I am sure that, sir, you have come for the first time? You have come for the first time? To AMU also. So I am sure that he has come for the first time, but it will not be the last time he has come. And we look forward to his continued interaction with Aligarh Muslim University and with the Quranic Center. And I am very honored to announce that he has also donated rupees 1 lakh for the study of the Quran for AMU students in hostels. So sir, we are thankful to you for this donation, because in my view no donation is small. Every donation, whether it is donation of 1 lakh or 1,000 rupees, every donation is important, and no donation is a small donation. And of course 1 lakh is an big amount. But even if somebody donates a small amount, I say no donation is small. And we should all appreciate it. So on behalf of Aligarh Muslim University and the students, I thank you for this donation. And we look forward, as I said earlier, we look forward to your continued association with Aligarh Muslim University and with our Quranic Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Abdul Kader Choughley to welcome at this.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dr. Abdul Kader Choughley साहब, बेगम डॉक्टर चौगले, मेरे उस्ताद प्रोफेसर मसूद हसन साहब और प्रोफेसर खलील अहमद निज़ामी मरकज़ बराए कुरानी मुतालात के लिए ये बड़ा खुशगवार यादगार दिन है कि ऐसे मुमताज़ आलिम का अभी आप मकाला सवाल फरमाएंगे। और उस इत्तेफाक ये है कि ये मकाला इस सदी के, इस दौर के अजीम मुफक्किर शेख अब्दुल नदवी के कुरानी खिदमात के सिलसिले में है। इनको हम लोग सभी मौलाना अली मियाँ के नाम से मारूफ हैं। उनका अलीगढ़ मुस्लिम यूनिवर्सिटी से भी बड़ा गहरा ताल्लुक़ था, उनका प्रोफेसर खलील अहमद निज़ामी साहब से बड़ा ताल्लुक़ था। और सबसे अहम बात ये कि मौलाना अली मियाँ का कुरानियात से बड़ा गहरा शौक़ था। बस एक चीज़ मुख्तसर मैं आप लोगों के सामने बयान करूँ। मौलाना अली मियाँ आमतौर से गर्मियों में इंग्लिस्तान तशरीफ़ लाते थे। जो प्रोफेसर फरहान निज़ामी साहब का सेंटर है कुरान की स्टडी, उसके वो पैटर्न थे। तो वो हिंदुस्तान के मुख्तलिफ मुतक़ीन हर जगह थे, हर शहर में जो बड़ा शहर था हिंदुस्तान का वहाँ जाते थे। मैं भी कई जगह शरीक होता था। एक मैंने गैर मामूली बात देखी मौलाना अली मियाँ की कि लोगों ने जलसे का इंतज़ाम किया। अभी जैसे ये हामिद मियाँ साहब ने तरत की, 2-3 आयतें पढ़ी। जो आयतें पढ़ी जाती थी उसी की बुनियाद पे पूरा आलिमाना खुतबा 40 मिनट, 45 मिनट, 1 घंटे का, मतलब उनको पहले से कोई तैयारी करने की ज़रूरत नहीं थी। जिस कारी ने जहाँ से जो आयत पढ़ दी बस उसी के हवाले से पूरी तकरीर उसी पे मुश्तमिल की। इससे आप अंदाज़ा कर सकते हैं ये कुरानियात पे तो कैसा दर्द था, कैसा शगफ था। और ये हमारे लिए बड़ी खुशकिस्मती की बात है कि प्रोफेसर खलील अहमद निज़ामी साहब की याद में ये जो लेक्चर का सिलसिला शुरू हुआ है, उसका पहला लेक्चर मौलाना अब्दुल नदवी के हवाले से है। और मैं इंतहाई ममनून हूँ अपने शेख जामिया का कि उन्होंने हमारी इस तजवीज़ को कबूल किया। मैं मशहूर हूँ प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर चौगले साहब का, आप तशरीफ़ लाए। और सबसे ज़्यादा मैं शुक्रगुज़ार हूँ अपने पेशरो प्रोफेसर निज़ामी साहब का, जिस अंदाज से, जिस नहज से उन्होंने सेंटर को चलाया। तो मेरे लिए क्या किसी की भी मुश्किल नहीं होता उसको, इस काम को आगे बढ़ाना, क्योंकि सब इंतजाम, हर तरह की सहूलतें, फंड्स, अल्लाह का शुक्र है, हर चीज़ मौजूद है। और इंतहाई खुशूसलूबी से हमारी तो दिली ख्वाहिश थी कि इस जलसे में यहाँ जलवाफूज होते, लेकिन वो अपनी कसर नफसी से, हिसाब से उन्होंने इसको दोबारा नहीं किया। प्रोफेसर निज़ामी साहब की तरह उनकी सरपरस्ती हमको हासिल है, ये हमारे लिए इंतहाई बेशकीमत है। आखिर में मैं मुख्तसर ये अर्ज़ कर दूँ कि प्रोफेसर के निज़ामी सेंटर ने अपने सामने 2 गोल्स रखे हैं। पहला तो ये है कि हिंदुस्तान में जो कुरान करीम पे जो काम हुआ है, हम उसको हाईलाइट करेंगे, उसको उजागर करेंगे मुख्तलिफ शक्लों से। मिसाल के तौर पर हिंदुस्तान की मुख्तलिफ रीजनल लैंग्वेजेस में जो तराजिम हुए हैं, जो काम हुआ है, उसको सामने लाए, ताकि कुरान की जो हिंदुस्तान में जो रूट्स हैं वो सामने आए। और यहाँ चूँकि बहरहाल एक इंडियन यूनिवर्सिटी में सेंटर कायम है, तो इस मुल्क से उसका ताल्लुक सामने, एक तो हमारे पेश नज़र ये गोल है। और दूसरा हमारे पेश नज़र मकसद ये है कि कुरान करीम की जो हिदायत आज के दौर में है, चाहे वो सरोगेसी के बारे में हो, चाहे इकोलॉजी के बारे में हो, चाहे कंज्यूमरिज्म के बारे में हो, ग्लोबलाइजेशन के बारे में, जितने भी सोशियो इकोनॉमिक पॉलिटिकल इश्यूज हैं, कोएग्जिस्टेंस का मसला है, टेररिज्म का मसला है, तो आज के जो सुलगते हुए मसाइल हैं, इनके बारे में कुरान करीम की क्या हिदायत है, उससे हमको क्या रहनुमाई हासिल कर सकते हैं। हम उसी पर इंशाअल्लाह फोकस करेंगे। इसी वजह से मुझे ऐलान करते हुए खुशी है कि 2 नवंबर को इत्तेफाक से वो भी साउथ अफ्रीका के साहब हैं, प्रोफेसर अब्दुल कादर इब्राहिम साहब, वो वहाँ की यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ साउथ स्पेशलाइजेशन है मेडिको लीगल प्रॉब्लम्स इन द लाइट ऑफ द कुरान, चाहे वो आर्टिफिशियल इंसेमिनेशन का हो, चाहे वो ऑर्गन डोनेशन का हो, चाहे वो जितने भी इस तरह के मेडिको लीगल इश्यूज हैं, इसके बारे में कुरान से हमको क्या रहनुमाई मिलती है। इस पर की कई किताबें हैं, इंशाअल्लाह वो 2 नवंबर को तशरीफ लाएंगे। आप तमाम हज़रात उसमें भी शिरकत फरमाएं ताकि हम अपने इन मकासद की हुसूल में कामयाबी से करें। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। और मैं एक बार फिर शेखुल जामिया साहब का शुक्रगुजार हूँ कि अपनी मसरूफियत के बावजूद आपने इसके लिए वक्त निकाला। हम उनकी इसकी मसरूफियात में इंशाअल्लाह आपको तशरीफ ले जाएंगे और प्रोफेसर चौधरी साहब अपना लेक्चर आपके सामने पेश करेंगे। शुक्रिया।
Thank you. Now I request respected Dr. Choughley Sahab to his valuable address.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All I can say is, based on what Professor Choughley Sahab had mentioned and what our Honorable Vice Chancellor has spoken about, a university as reputable and distinguished as Aligarh Muslim University, having 2 important goals. Professor Choughley Sahab just mentioned integration. I would have used that word, is part of my paper, integrating Quranic studies into the fabric of Aligarh, 1, and making the message of Quran relevant based on changing socio-economic landscapes. Professor Saab, you've just read the message that I was going to deliver in my paper. Shukran jazeela. Distinguished guests, I'm just going to take a few words and share a few words before I start with my informal discussion on the paper. The paper is a summarized version, a synopsis, so to speak, on the actual paper itself, which runs into about 40-50 pages. And at the prodding of Professor Choughley, I've been working with time constraints. Professor Saab, we know Professor Saab, stickler of time. And obviously, normally we speak of budgetary constraint. Here there was a time budget for me, and alhamdulillah, I met the deadline. On a personal note, Aligarh University, though I have not seen this place, I have read about it. There is, can I use the word rabta? A rabta, a personal contact with Aligarh Muslim University. I know it's AMU. I had read about Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan Marhum. I had read quite a number of books on Professor Khalif Ahmed Nizami Marhum. And obviously in the West and in the academic world, he is considered to be a doyen of literature, especially his specialization on the early medieval Islamic, the Indo-Muslim culture, so to speak, with emphasis on the Chishtiya silsila. Alhamdulillah, I had spoken to him once. What an honor it was. I have been connected with Dr. Nizami, and Professor, I'm going to use a word, no flattery intended. Professor Choughley is my tahdis and ni'mah. I know. This is it. I've been reading about Professor Choughley, and then only did I realize who is Professor Choughley. I had spoken about Maulana Daryabadi, and that's how we began to interact, and there was some collaborative efforts on a personal level, on Maulana Alimiya, and obviously there will, inshallah, be some collaborative projects with the Quranic Studies Center, inshallah. When he had spoken to me, he asked me about sharing some thoughts on Maulana Alimia, and the focus was going to be on the Quranic aspect. No formal book has been written as much as we have been able to count information from the major works, particularly Guidance on the Holy Quran, which has been translated by Professor Sayyid. That was the starting point that prompted me to find the necessary information, and the other books. I'm sure we're all familiar with Islam in the World and the other major writings of Maulana Alimia. What we're going to focus on, I'm just going to have this informal discussion. The synopsis is in front of you, and I know it is a very laborious exercise to read the whole thing. And I don't want to do that because I think this is an interactive session. And perhaps I will be able to share, coming from a foreign soil, South Africa, where people have been talking of Alimia, but there hasn't been any extensive study on him. They will say, oh, Eti Sheikh Nadvi. Now again, there is, on a lighter note, many of us, when we hear there is Professor Salman Nadvi that has come here and delivered a lecture, and there was Professor Habibul Haq Nadvi, and there are some graduates, and they append their surname with Nadvi. So many of them are curious to know, is this Nadvi family so big that you find one Nadvi in Indonesia, another one in South Africa? I think it's Professor Muzammil Siddiqui in the States. What about him? And I told them that, listen, Nadvi is an appellation. It's a title of a graduate. And in South Africa, they're not used to this. So I had to explain to them, you see, separate the Nadvi, and then you will have an eminent figure like Sayyid Abul Hasan Ali al-Hasani. To talk about him as an honor for me, as you will notice in the synopsis that I have provided, there are two key aspects about him from a Quranic point of view. One is the Islah component. Islah and Tajdeed, we're going to use this as interchangeable terms. So is it with Nahda and the Tajdeedi trends that he has spoken about. Very important book. I know it started with Azamat, etc. But in South Africa, in countries, it is known, we use the English translation, that the Saviors of the Islamic Spirit. And based on important and major writings of Alimia, the following paper draws our attention to the relevant facts as far as Quranic studies is concerned. One is the component of Islam. In the English language, we speak of Islam as reform. But reform has either become a generic term or the essence has been diluted. With the result that we speak of Islam, we speak of reform. Everyone is undertaking this whole, nowadays we use the word project, the whole reform project. I come from South Africa, and we have had this whole historical past of apartheid. And nowadays, when they say we have to move towards moral regeneration, then suddenly the term project comes in, without realizing that the word Islah has a specific Quranic connotation. Aslaha. I'm not going to go into the Sarf and Nahwa, I'm not going to go into the grammatical aspects, but as you read, you will find the word Islam coming in its variant forms. Islam, whether it's aslaha, for example, grammatically, but you will find the word there. The meaning yields variant expressions and variant ideas, And this is what we have to focus on. Because the word Islah and Tajdeed are interchangeable expressions. And it is also linked with what Alimia mentions about continuity and change. Tasalsul and taghayyur. Tasalsul and taghayyur in this case. So one needs to understand against the background of what the responses are from other Islamists or Islamic organizations. Nowadays the words have changed also, and it gives free expression to what we associate individuals, leading figures and Islamic movements with. We will not delve into that because the word activism has come about. Activism, political activism, Islamic activism, religious activism, but perhaps they don't fall under the rubric of the tajdeed. Perhaps they have this nuanced understanding of what tajdeed really is all about. Because Alimia has drawn a framework. And this is the framework that we need to understand in terms of what continuity and change is all about. And this paper speaks about this resurgence. In one of my books, I had spoken about resurgence, Alimia and his contemporaries, and there a detailed exposition was done as far as certain concepts are concerned, and they are correlated to what we are going to discuss. Now again, Islam, Tajdeed, where does this fit in? It's a Quranic perspective that we are talking about. And this whole thing can only be understood if we understand the formative influence of specific figures or luminaries, or ulama or mashayikh, because again, there's a whole range of scholarly tradition that has informed his understanding and his interpretation of Quranic studies. We would use the word Quranic study for our purpose here. We may start with his formative influence. I'm not going to go too much into his family background. You are more familiar than me when we speak about his father, Sayyid Abdul Kader, rahimahullah, and that immortal work, that monumental encyclopedia of Nuzhat al-Khawati, written in 8 volumes, covering 5,000. It's a biodata, if we have to use that nowadays. Consider that. Consider his brother, Dr. Abdul Ali, medical by profession, yet guides him and shapes the contours of his Islamic understanding. Keeping that in mind. And then immediately with Nadvi as a distinguished institution of learning, just like Aligarh Muslim University, there is this whole trajectory, there is this whole trend moving. There certainly we find that at Nadvi there is this whole play, an interplay of classical and contemporary learning as far as Islamic tradition is concerned. And Alimia is exposed to all these trends. What is his formative influence? The madrasa, the Darul Ulum, learning there, besides Maulana Hasan and the others. Then he comes into contact with a distinguished Mufassir in Lahore, Maulana Ahmad Ali Lahori, rahimahullah. What is his focus on? His focus is on Tawheed and dismantling the structures of shirk-laden practices. I'm not going to go, you notice how politically correct I am? I'm not using the actual terms, but I'm saying shirk-laden ritual practices. One, that is the focus. And we find that in Alimia he assimilated these traits, these qualities in his understanding and his interaction. At the same time, while I'm referring to the postgraduate classes that he used to attend, and obviously obtained the highest mark, but as far as he's concerned, he speaks in his Quranic Zindagi in volume 1 about the enduring and endearing influence that Maulana Lahori had on him. Again, the connection between Maulana Lahori and Maulana Ubaidullah Sindhi, freedom fighter. I'm sure you know about that. When he came back, obviously, it was a post-revolutionary understanding of Islam. Keeping that in mind. Maulana Ali Mian mentions, and one of his famous books also, that as much as he was immensely influenced by Maulana Lahori, that did not in any way imply that he was a conformist. He developed his own methodology. And it is this whole methodology, this manhaj, that actually guided him in interacting with people coming from diverse and divergent background or orientations. That's what it is. With the result that he was able to interact. And this made things very different. We will just pause for a minute. Shukran for that. What about Khalil Ahmed Yemeni? Now again, this is about translocal scholarship. Although he was in Bhopal, but the fact that he was of Yemeni origin, look at the background, look at the intellectual background, look at the local background, look at the setting itself, and here comes Sheikh Yemeni, or Sheikh Khalil Sahab, or Arab Sahab, as he was affectionately known. And Alina in his Karwan, you notice that I am focusing on his autobiography, which is written in 7 volumes. He speaks about the great influence that Sheikh or Arab Sahab had on him, particularly as far as the Arabic grammar is concerned, which prepared him for Quranic studies and an extensive study on classic and contemporary tafsir, number 1. Number 2, the emphasis on Tawheed, which is central to the writings of Maulana Ali. That is what we have to keep in mind. And then again, in one personal account he speaks of whenever Sheikh or Arab Sahab, Sheikh Khalil spoke, and he read Fajr Salah, he used to read the Surah Zumara, and there the emphasis is on Tawheed. He said he could not complete whatever he read because he used to burst into tears. The whole idea was the shugaf, the love and attachment that Sheikh Yemeni had for the Quran. And again, these were the formative influence as far as Alina is concerned. I'm just taking you on a timeline journey. This timeline journey is very important to understand the phases or the maturing and nurturing part of Alina as far as his contribution to the Quranic studies is concerned. And once keeping this in mind, one needs to understand that Alina reminds the readers or Muslims that you need to connect with the Quran rather than a routine, mechanical connection. You need to ponder over the verses of the Quran. You need to understand what is the message of the Quran, because there are key words. One is the timeless message of the Quran. Number 2, as Professor has rightly pointed out, the relevance. We are all exposed to globalization. We're all exposed to the changing landscapes as far as socio-economic matters are concerned. Even the university, even the country is exposed to these kind of trends. And this is what is going to happen. And this is what Professor, what Alima reminded us. Connect yourself with the message of the Quran. So keeping that in mind, we find that Alima now works on an academic, or perhaps let's move away from that, speak about an intellectual, scholarly tradition. One might expect him to write volumes and volumes in terms of what the Quran is and what are the tafasir, or what are the key concepts. But Alima starts off, and this is very important if you have read his book on the Mansab al-Nabuwat, Professor Tayyib, or perhaps in English is known Islamic concept of prophethood. His starting point, or the frame of reference, as the Anbiya. Now, one might wonder, why so much of emphasis? The Quran is actually replete with accounts on the lives of the Anbiya, without which there is no complete understanding on the role of the Quran and the role of Tawheed. Think of Tawheed. Tawheed is central to the message, the prophetic calls, to the calls of the Anbiya. One, the message. Number two, the methodology. Number three is the reform of a nation or the reform of a society. These are the formulations that we have to keep in mind. One is Tawheed. Number two is the method that they use. And number three is what is the overall purpose. Now, the Quran has some beautiful descriptions. Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'izah. Invite people to key concepts. Hikmah, I know it is loosely translated as wisdom. Maw'izah, we use the word maw'izah in Urdu language as well, fair exhortation. And Alina reminds the readers, look at this in context. With Alina's writings, he always gives us a broader framework, number one, and number two, he gives us, I would say it this way, content and context. I think these are very important words. They're interfused, so to speak. And Alina says, look at the lives of the Anbiya, and you'll be able to see what they have been doing. They have been aiding mankind. There have been nations caught up in moral decadence. You know, there is this whole rhetoric about nations who had suffered, nations who we don't see or we don't hear about except here and there. Here, Alima says this is the role of the Anbiya. And what is very important is hikmah and maw'izah. Where do we see this? We see this in the life of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. Even under challenging circumstances, when he is in prison, what is the message that he gives to his inmates or to the prisoners about Tawheed? How you should focus your whole life. Quranic message, Tawheed. How do you focus? And then he brings about the change in their mindsets, because the prophets, in this case, they do not come with intellectual sophistry. They do not come with lines of argument. They do not come with polemics. They reach your hearts. Are we doing the same thing? Are we reaching the hearts, or are we trying to create this whole debate on how intellectually polished, how intellectually sophisticated we are? Are we following the message of the Anbiya? The heart, we will say, oh, mind over matter. You know, we're not going to talk about that. We're talking about real stuffs. And this is what the Anbiya is. And the most important thing is, as much as we have a timeline, as far as the message of the Anbiya is concerned, is the consistency of the message. There is that istiqamah. The consistency of the message is what we see in their lives. And it doesn't stop there. after the Khatim al-Nabiyyin, it's obvious that someone had to continue with the message. And the Quranic generations, as Al-Imam refers to, with the Sahaba, you will notice that in all the writings of Al-Imam, the Quran, the Sunnah, and the Sahaba. Why? When we speak of the Sahaba and we find that the generation that follows them, obviously we are talking of the Salaf. Now people, you listen very carefully. I know I'm going to play with grammar. It's Salaf, not Salafiyya. Notice the difference. Salaf and not Salafiyya. Because we have hybrid forms. We have hybrid forms of Salafiyya. Nowadays, the potential of losing your iman is very great. I'm being very honest about the whole thing because we are not following the Salaf. And this is the emphasis that Al-Imam had been giving in terms of the Quranic message. That you do not disregard your truths. The legacy, whether it's academic, whether it's Quranic, whether it's Islamic, whether it's intellectual, these are all the links to the legacy that we are talking about. This is the trust that we are talking about. And Al-Imam cautions the Ummah that as much as you are going to follow the Sahaba, as much as you're going to follow the Tabi'in and the Tabi'in, etc., that make up our whole Quranic generation, remember, he cautions people, do not confuse. You need to separate the new revolutionary slogans that we find in Islamic organizations. You know the social order that we're talking about? We will find political activism that is conflated with the simple, direct and forceful message of the Anbiya. Let's keep that in mind. And perhaps we will be able to see what Al-Imam has to say, that the consistency of the message is very important as far as the Quran is concerned. Now, is Al-Imam merely advocating the Quranic message without putting that message in a particular framework? We need to think in a local context. Globalizing the message in a local context. And that's the Qiyam Insaniyat. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the Qiyam Insaniyat, the message of humanity. What was the real purpose of the message of humanity? Again, Al-Imam uses the Quranic ayah of Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahi anil Munkar. And then, what's the purpose? Enjoying what is good and forbidding what is wrong. Is it only restricted to a Muslim community? What if we don't practice it? It becomes an abstract thought. This is very important. So Al-Imam, together with those supporters, etc., they started with this whole movement, Qiyam Insaniyat, 1974. And then, what was the purpose? Moral regeneration? Obviously, keeping in mind the Quranic message of Amr and Nahi. Enjoying what is good, but obviously, as Professor rightly said, adapting the message of the Quran to circumstantial settings. Professor, I've stolen those words of yours. Sorry for the plagiarism. Circumstantial settings are very important. And this is what Qiyam Insaniyat is. In the subcontinent, in the Indian context, you need to create a sense of communal harmony. You need to create moral regeneration. You need to bring people. Al-Imam does not in any way advocate wahdat adyan. There is no syncretic religious practice that he has in mind. It's not wahdat adyan. It's wahdat akhlaq. And that is very important. This is the distinction that we have to make in this case. And you will find that it continues, the message for humanity continues. But the whole idea is to understand how Al-Imam expands the notion, the Quranic ayah, which at one stage was merely restricted to the Muslim community or to the millet. See how he goes about with the whole thing. And this is very, very important. And what is the message? Based on the Quranic ayah, we have the builder. You need to, number one, protect your tashakhus, your corporate Islamic identity. That's very important. Regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the social and political circumstances, mainstream, as far as anemia is concerned, this can only be possible if we pursue a middle-of-the-road approach. And that is known as wasatiyya. Ummatan wasatan. Ummatan wasatan. Middle of the road. What is it? What are the characteristics? Number one, obviously, we have i'tidal. We have a sense of proportion and balance. There is this whole equilibrium in whatever we do, because it's like going on one of these lanes coming from Delhi to Agra, and then you're on the highway, and then suddenly you find that the lanes are there. Obviously, you're not going to veer out. You're going to use the lanes. The lanes offer you options, isn't it? But yet you are in the same direction. Similarly, wasatiyya is very important. Sense of balance. It steers you away from extremism and liberalism. And this is a Quranic directive of wasatiyya. If we can fully understand and appreciate what wasatiyya is, inshallah, we will be able to move in this direction. And this is what Alimia has been talking about. Remember that in any country, whether it's in South Africa or any other country, assimilation policies work without an invitation. They are there. And we as the Ummah, we have to protect our corporate identity. And this is the message of wasatiyya. Alimia speaks about wasatiyya in also a different sense, that why is it that the Muslims cannot advocate wasatiyya or perhaps impart the message of wasatiyya to other faith groups, so that a whole community can be a shining example, a role model, or a template, so to speak, of what wasatiyya is all about. And wasatiyya is not only confined to a country, it has no regional borders. There is no timeline. It is not constrained by chunks of territory or by a time zone. Wasatiyya goes beyond that. Now you may try and figure out what is this Quranic link of wasatiyya to Alimia's message. We move on to the next phase, and that is the message for Muslims who have settled in other parts of the country. I'm not going to go into the historical background as far as the patterns of Muslim immigration in the West, particularly Europe, or perhaps London, or England, because of the colonial link, or in Germany, or perhaps United States. You will find, as Professor Hisham Saab has so rightly pointed out, when he met Alimia in the 1978, when Alimia had gone for cataract, if I'm not mistaken, and then that's the time he undertook several lecture tours, and the message was very clear to Muslims in the West. You have settled in a new area, you have settled in a new country. Are you going to shed your Islamic identity? That was the message that he had been given. And the message is very, very clear. Muslims, obviously, you are living in a new world. It's this whole diaspora community. that are settling there. What do? Do you shed your Islam? Do you get sucked into the vortex of materialism? And you will notice that Alina speaks about materialism. He speaks about a Western outlook, about a Western mindset. And all of them are connected to the concept of Jahiliyyah. I know we use the word this person is a Jahil. But we tend to use it in a generic sense, not in a Quranic sense. I'm not going to go into details as far as what Sayyid Abul Ala Mawdudi, Rahimullah, Sayyid Qutb, and the others have to say. Alimia speaks, he draws a distinction between the Jahiliyyah of what people think and the real Jahiliyyah, where he traces the Jahiliyyah to the Greek and Roman civilization. And he says that the imprint is still firmly established there. But regardless of what he has to say about Jahiliyyah, which he draws from the Quran itself, Alimia again goes on the Wusatiyah path. What do Muslims do? Do Muslims surrender to the West simply because they are dazzled by its scientific and technological advances, or simply Muslims reject the West? You notice the binary opposites here? One as total surrender and one as resistance, moving on to rejection. Alina again reminds the Muslim that you do not do that. You have to acquire the sciences, but yet at the same time, do not lose your identity. You are the muballighin, because your whole frame, your frame, your understanding of da'wah through the lenses of the Anbiya and the message of the Quran itself. This is very important. And I was touched by one of the lectures that Alina gave at Leicester University, and our distinguished professor gave the background how Alina, for example, whenever he was caught up and then extemporary, he was able to deliver a whole lecture based on the recitation of the Qari. That's what. And the famous one, Professor, is the one that you have translated, Dawah in the way, the Quranic Paradigm. The Quranic Paradigm. And this is what the Quranic Paradigm has to say. And Alina refers to one ayah of Alam Tara, Alam Tara Kayfa Daraba Allahu Mathalan Kalimatan Tayyibah. Kalimatan Tayyibah. Allah uses that as a simile, as a comparison, perhaps a parable in this case, where what is the meaning? Do you not see how Allah has given the example of a good word? A good word is kalimatun tayyibah. It is like a good tree whose root is firmly fixed and whose branches reach the sky, ever yielding its fruit in every season with the leave of its Lord. And the leave of his Lord in this case referred to تُؤْتِي أُكُلَهَا كُلَّ حِينٍ بِإِذْنِ. That again is very important. So using this example, Alima is able to illustrate a very important point, that as far as dawah is concerned, like that kalimatin tayyibah, like that good word, it can be adapted. It is suited, it can be tailored to different circumstances. And here is a message for the West, for Muslims in the West. Now again, you may ask, is it only the message that Alina gives to the Muslims in the West? No. This message has to be imparted by Muslims to non-Muslims. This whole interaction is very, very important. And I think we need to consider this as a starting point to constructive and positive dialogue without compromising on our Islamic identity. Now, keeping this in mind, Alimia goes one step further and says that perhaps we need to reflect on our role as the custodian, as the Khalifa. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I won't go to the second part. That's where the negative part comes. Khalifa. The role of men is to establish his custodianship. And what is it? Not to believe that he is the fountainhead of all knowledge. He is not the source of all knowledge, but rather he's actualizing the will of Allah. And here comes the whole Iqra paradigm. And what is the Iqra paradigm? As Professor has rightly pointed out, that the logo emblazoned on the for Aligarh Muslim University is clearly written, Adam al-Insan, isn't it? Adam al-Insan ma lam ya'lam. Look at the relevance. Look how Alimia also draws our attention to the fact that the Quranic, the Iqra paradigm is very important. Iqra paradigm doesn't have a secular and religious part. There is no division, because he quotes Allama Iqbal in this case, where he says, where he speaks about, it's all a question of a narrowness of vision, if we're going to think along that line. We need to integrate knowledge as a whole, knowledge as an organic unit into all our disciplines, rather than separating them. Alimia mentions when he was conferred the Doctor of Literature at Kashmir University in 1981, where he spoke about the whole concept of knowledge, keeping in mind the Iqra paradigm. Iqra paradigm is very important. It integrates, it brings together, it does not create a dysfunctional personality. Unfortunately, this is what we are experiencing without realizing. We are not saying it, but this is what is happening. It has kept us in two different worlds. Like, for example, our mind is here, but we were not connecting with the Quran. And this is what Alimia said. Focus on the message of the Quran. Give it a contemporary relevance. Perhaps even use it in a contemporary idiom. But let the message settle in your heart. Do not allow rust to settle. We only have the outer crust as far as the Quran is concerned. But the inner meaning, the kernel, so to speak, is missing. We have de-linked ourselves. From the message of the Quran. And that is why Alimia forcefully reminds us to connect ourselves as far as the Iqra paradigm is concerned, because the whole Iqra paradigm can bring about real transformation. And transformation not only for the Muslim community, not for the Ummah only, but for humanity at large. Otherwise, we are going to experience the sinking ship syndrome. You know the sinking ship syndrome? We believe that we will look after ourselves on the upper deck, but we'll make a hole down. And you know what happened. Once Muslims also experienced the Andalus syndrome, that was enough for us. We do not want to be caught up into the trappings of these syndromes. Syndromes create a very negative mindset. And that is what Alimia speaks about this. Use your Quran as a guide in this case. Use these particular verses. Go back to the Quran. Find the true message, because it is very important that we link ourselves rather than de-linking ourselves from the universal and timeless message of the Quran. And then Alimia says that when it comes to this whole transformation, or this whole reformist thought, or this Islamic resurgence that brings all aspects together, and I think at this point in time I want to express my sincerest gratitude to the Quranic Foundation, to the FA Quranic, to the to the Khalid Ahmed Nizami Quranic Center, which is moving in this direction. The number of publications I have seen and the number of lectures that I have also watched already tells me that this is the way to go. Alhamdulillah. And again, this cannot be possible if our intellectual domain doesn't undergo an overhaul. And again, Alina reminds us, remember, we spoke about the social taghayyur, continuity and change. We need to go back. We need to go back and see that as far as the great scholars are concerned, whether it is Shaykh Abdul Kader Choughley, whether it's Ibn Taymiyyah, or whether it is Shah Wali Allah. I've taken 3 strands, as you see in this paper, to show you that Alina tries to bring up a consistent picture. He creates a consistent picture and says, look, all of them from different backgrounds, from different time periods, but yet all of them are guided by the spirit of the Quran and Sunnah. Even any tajdeedi reform or any tajdeedi reform project that has to be undertaken, this is not possible without the Quran being the reference point. And you'll notice in this case, take Shaykh Abdul Kader Choughley, rahimahullah. In this case, he was the one who worked in the hearts. As Alina mentioned, one of his greatest miracles was not the miracle that people talk about or give an embellished account of, but the greatest miracle was changing of the hearts. And in his case, besides being guided by the Quran as far as his mawa'iz is concerned, was the tazkiyah nafs, the purification of the soul. Ibn Taymiyyah, obviously people have opposing views on him, but this much we can say that he reformulated the Islamic intellectual tradition. How can we ever forget Shah Wali Allah and his tajdeedi reforms? The whole country continues to benefit from Shah Wali Allah's transverse, bold initiative, translating the Quran into Farsi, into Persian. And the pedigree of the authentic Quranic translation has continued from Shaykh Abdul Qadir, I think Shah Abdul Qadir onwards. I want to share a personal note. I was looking for some information this morning, and I said, how does Alimia's tafsir works? And are there other people that have been influenced by him? And I happened to be at the guest house, and I opened the tafsir in Urdu by Maulana Abdul Karim Tariq, I'm not too sure about his name. And there I saw Alimia wrote a forward to that and said that, listen, as far as the Quran is concerned, there must be a lived experience. There must be a lived experience and interaction, because the Quran mirrors your life. It mirrors the challenges. It mirrors the opportunities. And that is why he says, I like the word where he says there's hararat, I think it's an old word nowadays, the temperature. The Quran has its own temperature, it has its own texture. And depending on your response, that's the kind of understanding and interaction you will have with the Quran. Is the Quran only about gestures and body language? No. Body language? Body language yields different responses. It's a momentary response, it can be a permanent feeling or experience. And this is what Alimia mentions in this forward to Maulana Abdul Karim's tafsir, that have that lived experience. Let the Quran become your personal journal. We do not want to just find and discuss on an intellectual level, this is what the Quran. Alimia's forceful message is that there is this whole personal journey of faith. Are we navigating? Are we navigating? Do we all navigate? We do. But is there a moral compass. I know the word mullah isn't a C person, but are we navigating this whole journey of ours with a moral compass? And that's what the Quran gives us. The Quran provides us with a moral compass. And this is what we are doing. And Alina mentions that if you do this, obviously your orientation will change, your focus will change. And how is this possible? Because we live in intellectual and academic worlds. We want to bring in healthy, positive Islamic literature. We want to see what does the Quran offer. There is a perspective to this whole thing. So in this vein, Alina and them established the Rabita Adab al-Islami al-Alami. We call it the World Forum of Islamic Literature. You may wonder, what was the purpose of this? Message, very simple. Realign literature to Islamic ethos. Realign literature to Islamic ethos. And during the early phase, there were other kitabs that were being taught. But Alimia's famous book is Qasas al-Nabiyyin. Obviously, much has been written about that, stories of the prophets. The whole idea that it contains Quranic vocabulary. And at this point in time, I'm reminded of Maulana Daryabadi. Obviously, Rahimahullah, Abdul Daryabadi, he was quite frank about the whole thing. He expressed his candor by saying that the previous textbooks that were used in the Nisab, in the curriculum of Nadvi, contain nothing but illustrations, not a word of the Quran, not the word of Allah and His Rasul, fully illustrated. And he expressed his candor, and in response to that, the Qasas al-Nabiyyin was written. Now you may wonder, we know that so many journals, so many seminars are hosted by the Rabita Adab in this case. What is the whole idea? Is to create a right atmosphere, is to change the mindset so that the literature can be healthy, can be positive, and can be productive. So keeping this in mind, we find that Alinia's contribution is major. You will find that in the synopsis I have touched on certain aspects, but I'm not going to go too much into that. The point that I want to make is Alinia's deep-seated attachment to the Quran is reflected in his love, respect for Maulana Abdul Majid Daryabadi rahimahullah. At his behest, the Islamic Research Academy undertook a complete revised translation of Abdul Majid Daryabadi's Quran, and the Islamic Foundation at Leicester also published a single volume with selected notes, and Professor was actively involved in that undertaking as well. So I have said much. I just want to remind you, to recap, that there are several key concepts as far as Alinia's understanding and his contribution to the Quran is concerned. One is the Quran and Sunnah. That's a frame of reference, without which the whole foundation of Islam does not rest. There is a second part which I want to spend a few minutes, is Islamic authenticity. Islamic authenticity is very important, people. We haven't understood this because many a time we find that we speak of things, but they don't operate in a continuum. We take it out of context. We say things without realizing the uniqueness, if I have to use the word, of the word Islamic authenticity related to our personal lives and to our collective lives. And number three, Alimia wants to remind us all the time, Quranic message is timeless. Quranic message is universal. Quranic message is immutable. It cannot be changed. For anyone who believes that the Quran needs to be changed, there is a serious problem. And in my paper we find that there are new trends, especially with the intellectual tradition, this religious thought. Nowadays there is this new word, I don't know, they use the word hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is an understanding and interpretation of the Quran. Hermeneutics has its own background, it has its own baggage, so to speak. And then nowadays we find that people are talking of ethical, religious interpretation of the Quran, which means in simple English, dismantle the timeless message of the Quran. Challenge the Quran as a divine message. Keeping that in mind, people, I think we need to reflect and ask ourselves, the message of this lecture is, number one, let us rediscover our faith. I'm not saying this is a conversion. Let us rediscover our faith. Let us recommit ourselves to the recitation, that's a tilawah, because the Quran is very clear on this. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. We have to purify ourselves. We need to have that inner understanding. The inner light of the Quran can only illuminate our hearts and minds if we give that reverential regard to the message of the Quran. And number three, let the Quran be our personal journal. Let the Quran in action, be part of our lives. With these few words, I want to thank you so much. I know I have exceeded my time, but I needed to share some of this thought. Shukran jazeelan.
Thank you very much. Shukran jazeelan. Now I request Dr. Nazir Abdul Majid sir, please come and Dr. Nazir Abdul Majid for vote of thanks.
Yes, we have 5 minutes time.
Okay, you can ask, I'll reply in English.
One is Hasan. We have left out the
I just used the one part.
So I wanted to clarify whether it was deliberate or
No, it was using context.
okay. Then the second thing which I wanted to tell, that we have, you said the paradigm. Until and unless we try to understand the essence of Quran vis-a-vis its language, until and unless we have some preliminary knowledge of Arabic language, how it is possible. And when our ulama, they told us five things. La ilaha illallah, namaz, roza, zakat, and hajj. Why did they not include the language part in that? Because reading anything without understanding doesn't mean anything to me. So is there any explanation for that?
Very brief.
I think what is very important, Professor Saab, is the whole intellectual transformation that we are talking about. I know what you are saying. It's a huge undertaking, this. Why is it there are historical backgrounds to this whole thing? Why is it that the focus was on the elementary? It depends on country to country. I think that is very important. Number two, it depends on the attitude of the people who are imparting this knowledge as well. We have to keep that in mind also. Number three, we have to look at the whole political situation. Why is it that, what was the purpose behind this? Was it just preserving our Iman and the Islamic teachings? Was that the real rationale? Or why is it that we couldn't go any further in this case? by answering that question. I think that's a dilemma that we're all experiencing. And if I have to say it in 1-2 words, I think it's going to be an understatement. But there are serious undertakings. I'm not saying there is a starting point by the Quranic Center, by other madaris. The whole idea is there has to be this whole collaborative undertaking. Once if we keep that in mind, then you're going to find we are not talking of the Islamization project. We are talking of a change, a real, meaningful, realistic change. So this project is huge and mammoth. And I do understand, and I share your concern as well.
Professor Nadvi Sayyid, Dr. Abdul Kader Choughley, and our former director and founder of the Center, Professor Hasan, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to propose a vote of thanks for me. I, on behalf of Professor Nizami Center for Quranic Studies and the entire team of the faculty members, supporting staff, students, members of the Quranic Studies Forum, and other research scholars of the allied department, and on my own behalf, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the esteemed speaker for gracing the occasion and sharing with us his thoughts about Maulana Abul Hasan Ali Nadvi and his contribution to Quranic studies. A big thank you to you, Dr. Abdul Kader Choughley Sahib, for emphasizing the importance of Quranic guidance and the work of Maulana Abul Hasan Ali Nadvi and of his middle of the road approach to Quranic teachings, which represents a mainstream Islamic thinking and steers clear of contemporary aberrations of extremism and liberalism. We are all inspired by your great words, sir. I also would like to extend thanks to the teachers and students of the university for being with us and listening to the wise words of the guest speaker. Last but not the least, I thank everyone of our team for their involvement and their willingness to take on the completion of the task beyond their comfort zones. Thank you all, and please join us for a cup of tea downstairs. Thank you very much.